Welcome to Convos from the Couch by LifeStance Health, where leading mental health professionals help guide you on your journey to a healthier, more fulfilling life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Convos from the Couch. I'm Nicolette Lianza, and I will be co-hosting this special episode today with our LifeStance Growth Marketing Senior Manager, McKenze Rogers. McKenze, great to have you on with me.
Oh, it's a delight to be here with you, Nikki, and I'm excited to talk with Cassidy today.
Yes, for sure. So today we are so excited to welcome Olympic diver, author, and all-around remarkable human, Cassidy Krug. McKenze, would you like to further introduce Cassidy for us?
Yes, I'm super excited because Cassidy and I dove together back in our college days at Stanford. I was actually before her, but she went to school at Stanford right after me, and diving is a small world. So we all know each other. We've been on the pool decks together many years, but Cassidy was a very accomplished athlete and qualified for the 2012 Olympic London Games, competed there in the 3-meter springboard, but has also earned 10 national titles, been NCAA Diver of the Year, and earned so much, as well as written her book, Resurface, a guide to navigating life's biggest transitions. So this is a great book. I recommend everybody grabbing it. We're going to talk about this today, and let's dip into it. Cassidy,
Oh my gosh,
please say hi.
Hello. Thank you so much, McKenze. Thank you so much for that intro. Nikki, it's so great to meet you. I'm so excited to talk with you both today.
Oh my gosh. So let's literally dive in here. The Olympics have started, right? And so I am curious, what's happening with the athletes now as they're competing? What's happening mentally? Can you take us back to what you were going through, your own Olympic experience?
Oh, of course. Yes. So for me, and I think for many athletes, the mental game is as much an important part of what you're doing as the physical game, if not more. There were kind of two types of divers back when there are still two types of divers. Yeah, I always felt like there were people that just loved the competition and they might not have the best practice, but they get on the board and they would just get into go mode. And then there were ones like me. I always felt like I had to be the best diver in the pool by far in order to handle the competition, because I was generally, for most of my career, pretty anxious about it and often was making small mistakes in competition that I wasn't making in practice. And so I worked really hard. I worked with a lot of great sports psychologists to turn my fear of competition into a strength, like to recognize that those butterflies were going to be there, but that they could make me stronger and not just make me hurtle up the side of the board or something crazy like that. And that's actually what I consider to be one of the biggest accomplishments of my own diving career. Is by the time I got to my Olympic trials in 2012 and the Olympics in 2012, I wasn't afraid and I loved the competition. And it just is a testament to work in the gym and work in the pool, but work in your own mind is as important.
Awesome. That's beautiful. And obviously that dips into the book, Resurface, that you wrote. And we'll make sure to put the link to the book in our webpage here so anybody else can access it. But tell us, Cassidy, what was your experience from going to the Olympics to then not having Olympics, not having diving? How did that inspire writing Resurface and the whole concept around transitions in life?
Yeah. So I was 27 years old when I competed in the 2012 Olympics, and it had been a dream of mine. Both of my parents are diving coaches. So basically, since I was born, I had been dreaming of going to the Olympics. I had tried twice before and not made it. And when I was 27, I made it. It was one of the peak experiences of my life. And the day after the Olympics ended, I retired.
I was done. Yeah.
And that was a transition. I saw it coming. I had gone to Stanford. I had gotten a degree. Like, I knew that it was going to be tough. And it was still a heck of a transition to go from knowing what I was about, both in terms of what I did every day and also what drove me every day to all of a sudden not knowing and having to figure that out. And so that was it acutely in the moment. In
Yeah.
the couple of years after I retired, that was an intense period of murk. And then it had echoes that lasted much longer. Like eventually I got into advertising and I started working my way up the ladder, and I was treating it like the Olympics and putting all of
All of
my
your
heart
energy.
and energy and intensity into this career, but I wasn't getting the same thing back. And that was that was troubling to me. So about 7 years into this advertising career, I just got hit with this desperate need to try to figure out what had happened with that transition. I was like, did I make the wrong choice? Do other Olympic athletes face this too? And so I started interviewing other Olympic athletes about their transitions on from sport. I interviewed about 40 of them. And then I
Amazing.
started realizing the themes I was learning from them were not that different than the people in my non-athlete life. My brother had just been fired. My dad had just retired. A friend of mine was coping with the after effects of cancer and and everybody was sharing similar themes. And so that was where this book came from, was that there are so many different types of transitions in the world. Everybody has such different experiences, but we have so much that we can learn from one another.
Gosh, absolutely. Yeah, and I can totally relate, having gone through my own transitions and knowing when I left Stanford and left diving as well and retired, it was a huge loss of identity, which we'll get into, and talking about how do you manage that. And so I also really loved hearing all the stories and the interviews that you did, Cassidy, because those talked about and talked with people from all walks of life, like people who maybe were unemployed or high up in the ladder, people who were veterans, people who were just everyday workers, whatever it might be. And I think there was a lot of different themes that came through. But one story that really resonated with me was with Emma. And Emma, who I believe is your friend, right? A current friend? Okay. And Emma, she had struggled with depression and self-harm growing up in her youth, but it lingered. And you could see how it just became her identity. And that was like who she was. She just assumed she was a sad person and that she would die young because she just was not very happy. And I really liked your point, Cassidy, in the book where you used a cliche that you said, everybody always knows the saying, there's nothing like your first love. But I think then you said, maybe there's nothing like your first identity. And I think that sticks. That stuck a lot with me. So talk about like that theme that you uncovered in your interviews, or maybe other themes that were pervasive around all the folks you talked with.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm so glad that you mentioned Emma too, because I think when we think of transitions, we think of retiring after the Olympics or getting married. There's these very clear life milestones. And for Emma, this transition lasted a long time and was quite subtle. And it was the result of a lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of life to go from not expecting that she would have a future to waking up in the morning and saying, I can see a future for myself. And I think the biggest lesson there for me is as a self-help book author, any of us, we want to find a framework. We want to find a worksheet. We want to find a thing that's going to say, I don't know what my identity is going to be, so I'm going to fill this out, and then I'm going to know what my identity is going to be. And sometimes we're not in a place where we can just make that choice and go forward. In fact, often we're not in a place where we can do that. And it's a matter of putting one foot in front of the other, gravitating towards the things that make you feel alive and make you happy and make you curious, and eventually realizing that you have found yourself in a different place than where you started. And that was a big theme. I think came through very strongly in Emma's story, but it came through in a lot of, I spoke to a friend of mine, another friend who was in recovery from cancer, and she had expected that she would follow the tropes that you see on TV, which is you get sick, you get treated, and then you move on and thrive. And she was left with fatigue and brain fog and lingering systems years after treatment, and was a constant battle to try to
Yeah.
figure out what normal was, what success looked like, what she wanted to expect from her life and ask of herself moving forward. And so I think that is one of those big themes that came up over and over again. Just this idea that it takes a lot of steps and it takes a lot of time.
You do mention about embracing the murk, right? And honoring grief. How can people learn to tolerate uncertainty and emotional struggles during transitions?
Mhm. That was a big one for me because
Yeah.
I was training for the Olympics in diving. Every single thing I did, the thing about having a big goal is that every single little thing you do matters. And what I ate, when I slept, dives I did in the pool, the amount of time I spent on different priorities outside of the pool. And part of that was stifling. Like part of the reason why I quit at 27 was because I wanted more freedom, but also it is unsettling and unmooring to go to a world where you're not sure what matters anymore. So I learned a couple of things about embracing the murk. The first one was from someone I interviewed named Jason, who is actually built very differently than me. Like I tend to want more structure and stability. Jason, who was another Stanford athlete, he ended up being a serial startup founder. He said, I don't fear change. I fear predictability and boredom. If it's unpredictable, it means that there's a chance for you to shape it. And just hearing that it was possible for someone to turn a similar situation 180 degrees in their own mind made me realize that I could talk to myself differently about the fear that I had around change. Another thing that I learned is that when you're in a big transition like that, your next chapter doesn't have to be your next Olympics. I think one way that I really struggled, like I finished the Olympics and was like, I'm going to go be a writer. And I sat in my room and I had the worst writer's block because I was putting all this pressure on writing to be my next Olympics and for me to be an Olympian at writing right away. And it just didn't work. And then I got into my advertising world and I did find some fulfillment there. I did move up there, but I was putting all this pressure for it to have as much meaning and as much clarity as the Olympics had, and it just didn't work. And so I think going out, following what makes you curious or interested, trying those things, celebrating if they fail, celebrating if you decide I'm not good, I don't like that, or I tried something and I wasn't good at that, like turning that over in your head so that it's a learning and not a failure,
Right.
and just putting one foot in front of the other again will help you get to a place where things feel a little less murky and you have a little more sense of direction.
Oh, that murk is so scary. That uncertainty, man. But it's almost inevitable. But even when you know it's coming, it's still scary and it's still uncertain. So a lot of these Olympians right now in the Winter Olympics currently, they're at the top of their game. It's going to be amazing and exciting experience as well as also possibly devastating if they don't get on the podium or they don't do and perform how they'd like to. And then it's over. Maybe there's somewhat of a high afterwards, right, Cassidy? But then they're going to hit this realization that it's over. And those that are retiring, they're finished. You talk in your book too about redefining yourself. What are some of the tools, which I think are helpful in your book, Resurface, that you not only talk and write about these transitions, but in each chapter, there's a guide on activities, whether it's journaling or going out and experiencing new hobbies, new tasks. What do you think are some of those tactics folks can do to help redefine themselves?
I'm going to share one perspective and two tactics. And the one perspective, and one of the things that I wish I had known or embraced when I was in the process of retiring from diving and moving on from it, was that I was allowed to grieve diving. I thought of grief as something that's reserved for a death of a person. And yeah, this was a sport. Yes, it was a sport that mattered to me, but this was a transition that I chose. I chose to move on. And at the time, I was like, all right, put diving in a box. I'm going to move forward as quickly as possible. And I was afraid to I remember in my early advertising days, I was feeling behind because I was 27 in an entry-level
Mhm.
job. But I was also feeling like there was all this pressure and all these expectations and all this baggage associated with being an Olympian. So I just didn't talk about it. I didn't want
Mhm.
people to really know. And I was worried that anytime at night that I dreamt about diving or that I thought about missing diving before I went to bed, then that was a signal that I wasn't moving on appropriately or that I was still trying to hang on like with a bad ex or something like that.
Which that would put me in a really bad spot because I dream about diving all the time still, all the time.
Wow.
It's
Yeah,
just it's never
me
going away.
too.
Which is back to your point of nothing like your first identity. Like it is subconsciously in me and it is never going away. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, get.
Totally. Yeah, and that's exactly, Mackenzie, that's exactly what I've realized is that it
Mhm.
is always in me. It's
Mhm.
part of me. It's very okay and
Mhm.
very normal to feel sad about something that I've left behind. Like nothing is
Mhm.
ever going to replace diving. I'm going to move forward and I'm going to find things that are a better fit for me now that are exciting in different ways, but nothing's ever going to replace that thing that I have lost. And it's
Mhm.
also part of me. So I learned that I had thought the point of grief was to forget about that thing and move
Sure.
on as
Yeah.
quickly as possible. But actually, it's about recognizing how it still affects you, celebrating how it made you who you are and how that love and how that work and how whatever that thing is something that you're carrying forward. But that's the perspective. The two things that I have found really helpful at times in my life that I have been in the murk, especially the
Mhm.
post-Olympic murk, were this idea of trying new things. I recommend a novelty week or a novelty month
Mhm.
if you have the time and space. It's sometimes nice to time box these things to give you a
Sure.
little bit
Yeah.
more get up and go, but try a lot of new things. And take
Mhm.
classes and things that you're interested in. Go out and reach out to someone who does something that you're curious about. Put yourself out there,
Mhm.
one thing.
Mhm.
Second thing, and this was probably particularly useful for me as a retired Olympian in a very precise sport, was find a way to celebrate more failure. So
Mhm.
I, at the end of a week, I did this for myself. I've done this in my job with people that report to me. I'm like, tell me something you did that you're really proud of this week that you feel like was a success. And tell
Mhm.
me something you did that didn't work this week. And what did you learn from that thing? Because I
Mhm.
think the worst thing isn't failure, it's failing to act because you're afraid that you're going to make the wrong choice.
Nice. Awesome.
I feel like this all tethers into just vulnerability, right? It's vulnerable to fail or to feel like a
Mhm.
failure. And I just want to commend you for the vulnerability you showed throughout this book in writing it and those
Mhm.
who contributed to it. And
Absolutely.
and I think there's just this such a struggle when it comes to vulnerability, when it comes to major transitions. Why do you think that is?
And yes, for so many reasons. I think the first of it is that if you're in the middle of a transition, you have no idea which way is up sometimes.
True.
Like you,
Right.
we, especially now in this like kind of perfected personal story, social media age, we feel like
Mm.
we're expected to have the narrative down. And
Mm.
we're like, I I transitioned, I like moved from here to here, I learned this, and this is what I'm doing next.
Yep.
And when you're in the middle of a transition, whether it's retiring from diving or a loss or an illness, like you don't always know what you're doing. You certainly probably don't know what you're doing next. And it's hard to talk about things when we don't know the answers. I
Yeah.
think also I often especially forget that human beings are made to give and receive help. Like
Mm.
we aren't solitary creatures. We need help. And also, we feel so good when we get the opportunity to give it. There's
Yeah.
research that I cite in the book by a researcher named Vanessa Hans, and she asked people to ask strangers for a variety of things. So ask a stranger
Mhm.
to borrow their phone, ask a stranger to raise funds for a charity run. My favorite is ask a stranger to commit a small act of vandalism, write the word pickle in a library book. I don't know how she got, this is my favorite. But she asked the people who were requesting help how
Mhm.
likely they thought others were to give it. helpers helped at a rate 48% higher than participants thought that they would. So we
Wow. Yeah.
just don't realize
Mm.
how eager the people around us are to help us if it seems like we know what kind of help we need, and it seems like that help is going to actually be pushing us forward in some way. And so one of the biggest takeaways, and this comes through in a bunch of different chapters, is, tell your story, share your vulnerability, share what you're struggling with, take the time to figure out how people can help you, what kind of help you're looking for, and put that out there, and you will be surprised and I think warmed by what you get back.
And Cassidy, that reminds me too, in your book, how you talk about, which I think applies to some younger generations who grow up constantly having answers because they have a cell phone, or now we have AI, and you should have an answer for everything instantly, quickly. But when you're in the murk or you're in a transition, you don't have the answers. And the younger generations, particularly, haven't had to experience that maybe as much as older generations. So it can be even scarier, and it's compounded for them. So I think that's really great advice for the Olympians and anyone going through transitions that's younger, maybe haven't been through such a major life transition, that the answer is not going to be online, and you're not going to be able to find it necessarily through your phone or on social media, but you have to go out and experience different things and try it and see how it works for you.
I think you're so right. And you're right. There's so much that's available. There are so many answers that are fingertips that we feel even worse when we don't have them. And even more like we haven't done the work, or that we're like subpar because we're unsure. And of course, those answers online, like that's mostly an illusion. Like I think about, I have a 3-year-old, and at various times I've Googled, how do I get my 3-year-old to go to sleep more easily?
Right.
And
Please
you
tell
will
me what you
find,
find out. Tell me what you find out, because my Gemma is
yeah, but here's the thing, like it's a million different websites giving you the same 10 bullet points
yeah.
that are not applicable to your particular, no, not necessarily like fine-tuned to your particular situation. And all that, you read them all night long, and then you're like, I've read everything and I still can't do it, so I must be a failure. And it takes work and figuring out what works for you and your kid.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that you brought up your kid, because you're a super mom as well as flying through the air as a trapeze artist.
Oh,
Cassidy,
yes.
I love looking at your Instagram. So at Cassidy Krug, if anyone's interested. You are amazing with doing trapeze. And I want to first understand, so what workouts are you still doing to be able to have that arm strength and that core strength? And then 2, where do you find a trapeze group? Like, how do you just happen upon those?
That's true.
Yeah. You know what? There are more around than you would think.
Really?
But so basically, I retired in 2012. I moved to New York. I spent about 9 months being like, nope, no more sports, or I'm going to just jog. And then in New York, excuse me, sorry. In New York, you can see the trapeze school from the West Side Highway. So I was jogging by the West Side Highway. I looked up, it's on the roof of a 3rd floor parking lot. And I was like, that looks fun.
Yeah.
And then I found that they happened to be in need of a trampoline instructor, and about a third of our diving training was on a trampoline. And so I was able to teach at the trapeze school, do trapeze. And it was honestly one of the things that really kept me moving forward and made me feel confident and strong and excited as I was going through that post-retirement transition. And it's funny because it served the same purpose as I've been going through the transition to motherhood. Fast forward 10 years, moved from New York to LA when my daughter was 2 months old. And that was, I thought the Olympic transition was big. The motherhood transition was at least equally big. And I was worried. I was worried that I was going to lose all the parts of me that made me, that I was going to just become a mom and not be able to do trapeze and not be able to write and find myself an unrecognizable version of myself. And I was so grateful. There's a trapeze school in LA, Santa Monica Trapeze School. They welcomed me with open arms, and it is something that I can bring my daughter to.
Yep.
And it's probably a little bit distracting, but everybody there loves her. Like every time we walk in the door, at least 3 other staff members drop what they're doing to go play with Ocean, my daughter's name.
Beautiful.
And it is such a gift to have something that I love to do. I teach trampoline there, so I love to do trapeze, and to feel like my child fits seamlessly within that. And it's such a family, and I'm so grateful for it.
That's
And
wonderful.
you probably also get that fulfillment and joy, because I can relate to that too, when your children get to see you doing something that you really love and that you really enjoy. Because when, particularly like diving or anyone else who does a sport or is maybe a musician or other things that you don't necessarily always get to continue once you are a parent, they never really got to see you do that in your prime. So I can imagine, Cassie, you appreciate Ocean being able to watch you enjoy doing that athletic experience and flipping and twisting around as if you were still on a diving board.
Yeah, there's a lot of tensions of parenthood, but one of the ones that I have felt is, am I doing my daughter more good by catering to what she seems to need in the moment, or by showing her that by providing an example of doing something that I love?
Yep.
And it's a balance of both, but it does feel really good to be able to show her that I love it. And I've always said she doesn't have to do what I did. She certainly doesn't have to be a diver, but I hope that she's passionate about something. And this kid loves trampoline. She loves trapeze. It doesn't have to be the case, but it does warm my heart to see her fall in love with the same thing that I like.
Beautiful.
So Cassidy, if readers can take away one core idea from Resurface, what do you hope it would be?
Well, there's a lot of ideas in Resurface, but I think the thing that I keep coming back to is that whatever it is that you're facing, you're not alone. I think that when we're in the middle of a transition, that murk is so overwhelming and it feels so unique to us, and it feels like other people can't possibly understand. And not only are there other people who have experienced similar things to you, but there are people who have experienced really different things but had similar feelings. Like, for example, I have one chapter that's all around the loss of community that we face often with transitions. And I talked to a woman who was in a skydiving accident and became quadriplegic. I talked to a woman who had recently been divorced. And I talked to a woman who was older. She had been a teacher and she was taken out of the workforce by health issues and had lost that. And very different experiences, right? But the things that I heard from each of them, I was like, oh, I wish I could share this. The woman who had been in a skydiving accident had recognized that she can't go out into the world in the same way that she could before. And so she hosts this regular Tuesday event called Tater Tuesdays. All of her friends bring their friends. They come to her house and they bring the outside world in and make her feel like a relevant part of that community. Or the person I interviewed who had recently gotten divorced, she was younger and none of her friends really understood what, like they hadn't experienced divorce before. They didn't know what to say to support her. And so she worked with her therapist on how to tell her friends what she needed. And these things, like proactively trying to build community, figuring out how to tell others what you need, those are lessons that we can all share when we lose sense of community. So yeah, number one, you're never as alone as you think you are, and reach out and share your story, and you will find that more people connect than you think.
Gosh, thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. Any other takeaways you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think there's one exercise too, and again, every chapter has a series of exercises that you can do in your own life to make the stories and lessons in that chapter tangible and applicable. But if there's one that's along those lines, I love an informational interview. And mostly we think of informational interviews in a job context, and I've certainly used them that way. Like when I was after the Olympics trying to figure out which way was up, I went on, I think, like 15 informational interviews with anybody that had anything to do with writing or words or ideas. And I asked them what they did and what they liked about it. And that was after months of Googling and trying to figure out what career I should go into, that was the thing that helped me. It's not just a career thing. If you're debating whether to go freelance in your work, if you're coping with a diagnosis that's scary to you,
Yeah.
I interviewed and told the story of one person who got in a relationship with a guy who had 2 children. And she was like, what if you're suddenly finding yourself a bonus mom and you don't know exactly how to do that? Find somebody. Maybe it's a friend that you want that's in your network. Maybe it's a friend of a friend. Maybe it's someone that you respect online. Find somebody who is going through the transition that you're coping with. Reach out to them. Ask them if they'll do a quick Zoom or have coffee with you. Have some questions, and you will learn a lot. And like they may not, every bit of advice they give is probably not going to be applicable for you. They may not share all of the same emotions and all of the same facets of transition, but you will learn something from them and you will feel like you're not alone. So if there's one exercise, one bit of homework that I recommend, it's whatever transition you're facing, go do 1 or 2 or 3 informational interviews and connect with someone else that's facing that.
Thank you. I don't think people think of it that way. I think you're right. I think people tend to think of it regarding jobs or career, but that is great. Great advice. Cassidy, I want to thank you again. Thank you for joining McKenze and I. Your book is amazing, and you're obviously very amazing as well. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all the great questions. And it's so exciting for me to be able to share with both of you.
Yeah, it was a joy to be here today, and I can't wait to see your next trapeze video on Instagram. I'm going to keep looking.
I'll post another one soon for you, McKenze.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you again. I'd also like to thank the team behind the podcast, Jason Clayton and Julianne Whitten. Thank you again for listening to Convos from the Couch. Take care, everyone.